We got a little deer action there. Perfect. Where's he going? Welcome to episode 32 of Randall Vision. I'm your host, Randall. And I don't know what the working title is. I am not a teacher. And this is kind of a summary episode of restating what I'm doing and trying to clarify stuff that I'm going to jump right into it. I've got 6 pages of chicken scratch, and this will be a crying episode because I cried when I wrote it. So probably going to cry when I read it back. And there's room for me to add additional thoughts to some of the chicken scratch. But I knew that it was like a broad enough, the amount of points I wanted to make was broad enough that I couldn't just do it off the top of my head without missing something. This is supposed to be like a more specific, once again, we'll come back into it. I don't know if I've used this metaphor yet. Like my life may have began as like a seed, and it grew into a vine, and now it bore fruit, but now it's time to press the fruit into juice. I feel like I'm being juiced. I'm a berry and I'm being juiced. I've been holding so much stuff in for ever, and now it's starting to come out, so bear with me. Margin notes or no margin notes? No. Points I want to get across. Number 1, when I began the project, it was pretty clear that I didn't know what I was doing, and I still don't. But as pieces become clear, I should share them in as plain and comprehensible manner possible. One clear objective is increasing my efficacy as a communicator. All right, the story of my experience with Buddhism. Oh, yeah, that is relevant. This is all relevant. That's why I wrote it down. The first time I really came across any Buddhist principles was just now I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was just a book out of the attic, and not sure who's, but it was a book on Buddhism, and just flipping through it, not really reading it cover to cover, my first contact with the word, is this the story? That was my first contact with the word bodhisattva, and whenever I encountered it, it struck a chord. It's is that me? Is that what I was meant to do? And so I tucked it in the back of my mind, and I never got in depth with Buddhism, as with most religions. I just took a very surface level piece of it and ran with it. I took the singular statement, desire is the root of all suffering, and I applied it to my life for a long time, more than 10 years, that it was a way to reframe every bad thing that ever happened to me. And even while you're going through it, you're what did I want that led to this? How is this a product of my base desires or whatever? And it's not always clear in the moment, but the longer you go along, it's there's something here. So it doesn't shape your or reformulate your behavior on the spot, but it can over time if you attempt to integrate it into your life. With just one sentence, like I don't know anything about Buddhist practice or whatever, but if you take desire is the root of all suffering and apply it to your life, then to me that's like, I don't think that's a wrong way to practice. I think that's I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. But bodhisattva, that ain't it. The word that I think that applies is pratyekabuddha. That is the goalpost in spiritual traditions, I think, that best describes where I am at. The bitch of it is that this is invisible. No one can say yay or nay. But the obvious thing to me is that I'm not a teacher. Teachers are effective communicators. I am not. So a quick definition of pratyekabuddha is like one that found their own way and doesn't know, they can't teach. And that's kind of like that. That's why I feel like it describes me, is that like I ain't cut out for this. Furthermore, the teachers have taught. The world doesn't need me to regurgitate what has already been said. So like, you know, there's the prophets and the messiahs and the sages and the great philosophers and all that. What value do I add to the conversation by saying, hey, I understand a little bit of what some of those people said? You know, like that's not helping anybody. Other people, you know, that's not my job. So yeah, me just rehashing that's pointless. Also, furthermore, teachers don't cause learning in a student. Teachers facilitate the learning that the student undertakes voluntarily. Let me say that again. I was butchering that. Teachers facilitate the learning that the student undertakes voluntarily. So like, yeah, I'm not in the business of like rounding up people who want to listen or whatever. Like, I'm doing this because I want to listen to me, and then it's up publicly so that if others so choose, they could also listen to me. But you know, I'm not, there's no point in recruiting a student to teach them what? Maps and models. These help describe the territory, but they are ultimately not the territory. So even if I could put into words what was happening to me, it is an exercise in futility. These maps and models do help though. Yes, and has been one of my newer mantras, figuratively speaking. Of all working maps and models, you can say yes, and all the other ones too. That maps and models aren't mutually exclusive or what, like, okay. I wrote this down so I wouldn't have to. Okay. The point being is when you stack them all and see the similarities in how they can dovetail together, forming the most intricate interweaving of an idea structure that parallels or mimics our actual or perceived reality. And furthermore, how much does one depend upon the other? Are they separable? So like, we have the maps and models of reality, and people derive them from observing reality, But now that reality is now and you understand the maps and models, is what you're seeing because of the maps and models, or is it like it's hard to differentiate between the two, that what you think you see and what you see aren't particularly the same thing, but then you can only see what you think you're seeing. Like, it gets real fucked real quick. So, why bring this stuff up? My mission statement was to be authentic. With hindsight, after reviewing the project, it seems like I am trying to be clever by withholding stuff or obfuscation. Or maybe that I have a secret I want to tell and it needs coaxed out of me. But I was clueless then. This does kind of make sense. I was always the primary audience, so I guess I am the one whom I am pulling one over on. That's a great sentence. I'm so proud of that. I'm going to say it again. I guess I am the one whom I am pulling one over on. Say that 3 times fast. Okay, so here's where I get to loosen it up a little bit. There's some bullet points to talk over. And for context, this is kind of my brief historical, non-exhaustive, up until current and overlapping spirituality progression or timeline or something. So I was raised Catholic, and so what that means is I was like indoctrinated or whatever, that like you kind of hold a child against their will and tell them a bunch of stuff. And the stuff I remember is that we are all sinners, and we're supposed to love Jesus, and you need to go to confession to have your sins forgiven, to have a penance assigned, and to do that penance and then to be forgiven through that. And you're supposed to give them money, and what else? And that you... good people go to heaven and bad people go to hell, so you can't die with any sins on your soul, so you need to repent and die with a clean soul to go to heaven. So that's that in a nutshell. And more notes, like, I'm not anti-Catholic or anti-Christian. Loving Jesus is like super easy. Like, he's a good dude. Like, how much more of a good of a dude would you want before you could say that you love someone? So like, yeah, okay, yeah, I love Jesus. Easy. Done deal. But their process of the repentance, like I have my own version that I practice where whenever I do something that I know is wrong, like treat people poorly, it's not repented for until you eliminate that negative behavior. Like, you can't just keep being a shitbag. You like have to like grow into a better person. So that's kind of like been hard for me. I've been a professional jerk my whole life. So, yeah, anyhow, doing better. In later episodes, I'll get into more specific examples. That was followed by an atheist phase, which could also be described as scientism or materialism, like, and I feel like I was indoctrinated into that too. Not that the school systems taught in a particularly secular manner, but the high school that I went to, the math and science department was fantastic, and I was good at it. And whenever I started to learn all that, I was like, oh, like, religion and stuff is superstition. This just like totally explains how the world works. And that seemed obvious to me at that point in my development or whatever, that like, what do you mean creationism? You know, there's obviously evolution and stuff like that. So that dealt a significant blow. Now, when making that leap, that never at any point justified not being a good person. And at the time, I don't think that there would be any one thing in particular that I could finger as to why I felt that it was important to be like a good person. It's just like, once again, an obvious right thing to do. Now, and then too, yeah, that atheistic period of time too, touching on that moralism, it was bolstered by cartoons, anime, fiction, whatever. Like almost every story, the good guy wins. And if that isn't a good enough, that compelled me to, I wanted to be the good guy and I wanted to win. I didn't want to be the bad guy. Nobody likes the bad guy. What else here? And the other little side note I had on the being raised Catholic, even as a little kid, I thought to myself, like, you know, if all the stuff they're teaching me is true, then why is the world so shitty? Like, why do people do this bad stuff all the time? Why is the world full of bad stuff if religion is true? So it seemed like a contradiction to me, or a hustle, or something, like something was fishy. So number 3 on the C on the list is psychedelics. At the age of 16, I did LSD for the first time, and it quickly became apparent that scientism and materialism were also not the answer. It was like, wow, you could perceive the world in a completely different way. Like, why is all this extra stuff here? Is it here all the time and I'm just perceiving it now because I'm on a drug? Or is it always here and we just don't perceive it when we're not on the drug? Like, what the fuck's going on? A way to sum up for people who have not done psychedelics, like, so you're familiar with your thoughts, right? You could like think a thought, or sometimes you just have, you know, a thought comes into your head that's maybe not yours. Those kind of, you're familiar with those, right? Well, or think of here's the metaphor. Think of a thought as something you wrote down, like a sentence you wrote down. Well, that's what a thought is to like a normal person, but or to someone who has never had a psychedelic experience. But while on psychedelics, instead of a thought being a word written on a page, it's a bouncy house. It is something entirely different than this simple little collection of symbols. It is like something you can go and explore and so instead of like looking through a pinhole your whole life, you get to take off the rest of the blinder and be like, holy shit, there's everything. It's all here. And that's exciting. So you don't need to believe in a higher power for that, but like it makes you highly suspicious of boy, there's something else going on here, isn't there? This isn't just what I thought it was. There's stuff behind the scenes, guys. So, and that's it. That's the main takeaway. Next up, Taoism. I've already told the story about how I came in contact with it. I am a reductionist, and the way I applied it to my life is go with the flow, follow the path of least resistance. And now in more modern days, or more recent times, I have a little addendum to, this is like next level Taoism, is looking at the world as kind of like a magical place, and that one way of saying it is following the synchronicities that Jung speaks of, Carl Jung, or that there's a Tinkerbell, there's a little fairy that accompanies you in your life, and it'll show you stuff, and it manifests in all different kinds of ways. Like, it could be through living things like your pets or loved ones or associates. It could be a random message, whether it be through media or like a billboard or whatever, or like it's really trippy whenever nature does it in such a way that you're like, wow, that was weird. That, like, if it's pouring rain all around you and not on you, but you're like not covered, it's like, okay, that's fucking weird. That kind of thing. But being alert to the possibility that you may need to be spontaneous. I think that's kind of like, that's the only thing I have to add to years of going with the flow and following the path of least resistance. Then, as mentioned, Buddhism with the extremely reductionist, desire is the root of all suffering. So then I was just like, okay, I guess I don't want to suffer, so I guess I stop desiring things. And that's an erosion process. That's like cutting stone with drips of water. We want to want things. It's our reason to live, or was it joie de vivre or something? I don't know. So yeah, there's that. Now, next, there was a long stretch, kind of like a dark shadow that hung over many years. So like all of those things were kind of like integrated, but like I think I've mentioned like losing the sense of self, or not the sense of self, but like the derealization and being solipsistic, where I just walked around for a few years like knowing that I was God. And it was weird, like, because there was like no conclusion to be drawn from it. It was like, so this is it? So this is it. So we just do this now. And there's no fulfillment in that. And I was all alone. And I don't know, man. That's dark times. So, and during that, I think if you would have asked me what my faith was, it would have been something along the lines of like omnitheist. And now in hindsight, and I don't want to particularly catch grief for this, but to retroactively apply a label to it, some of the things I have learned in more recent years about Thelema, I feel like that was kind of like already the basket I was in, that I was kind of like the lost souls that are doing that one wrong. I was doing that one wrong as well, and just, I don't know, man. I was lost for a long time. So I didn't practice Thelema back then, but like, I don't know. I think my first introduction to that was buying a copy of Fresh Fever from the Skies, and written by IAO 131, and it's kind of a collection or explanation, essays on Thelema, explaining some of the nuance involved, or one interpretation, or sometimes several interpretations are offered. But it's a good work. And I don't know what drew me to it, and I think I purchased it around the time it was published and didn't read much of it, that like, went a little ways. And then this last summer I read more of it, about a couple more 100 pages. I read all the way up to around the 400s, where it hits a point about ceremonial magic. And I was like, I don't do that, so I just put it down. But, so, I don't know, I've just been like drawn to it as like a spiritually homeless person. Where am I supposed to go? Like, if I would walk into a Buddhist monastery and say, hey guys, I'm a pratyekabuddha, can you help me out? I have a suspicion they're just gonna like laugh at me, like, what is this dude talking about? Or I don't know. And I'm probably jumping to conclusions, but like, that doesn't feel like my calling or whatever. And whereas with Thelema, I think if I would describe the situation, members of that community, religion would be like, oh yeah, that happens sometimes. That I think well, for one, Thelema, I've been reductionist on the other ones. I'll be reductionist on this too. So like, science is real is one of the things I believe in, and I like that in a religion. And then the rest of it, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. And then they have specific interpretations of what will or true will means, and what love means, and all of that. But to me, there's a few points where like, every man and every woman is a star. Mind your own business, follow your path, and with a strong emphasis on individuality. And I think all of those elements are super important. So that's like why I'm drawn to that. The every man and every woman's a star. Like, the egalitarian viewpoint that all people are valid, like that what is at the core of each of us counts just as much. So that's also very important to me. And then, so the final stop after that. So the next stop on the spiritual journey was Islam. And there's a interesting story that led me to that one. So last summer I had kind of like a mental breakdown, spiritual awakening kind of thing, and I took some time off of work and got some mental health treatment, and all it's in the earlier episodes. But so after going back to work, one day I was just like, I was still pretty manic and writing down like stream of consciousness notes. And one of them was, God is returning to earth, surrender. And when my buddy showed up later that day for a hang, I showed him some of the notes, or was discussing the notes with him. And he's like, oh, you mean like Islam? And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's like what it means, like surrender or submission. And I'm like, why did I write that down out of a stream of consciousness thing? Like, what is that supposed to mean? And yeah, the Wikipedia definition, that the translation into English, submission to God. So you take that, then I was in a Tumblr of listening to Alan Watts and Ram Dass. So there's like a dash of Hindu influence in the way of seeing things, and just kind of like syncretizing. I don't know how to say that word. Not synchronizing, but the other one. I don't know. I should have wrote it down or figured out how to pronounce it. But they kind of like help syncretize all of it together. And okay, so yeah, back to some pre-written stuff. These are not merit badges. I have been searching for answers all my life, and this is a rough sketch of the path I took. And a conclusion that I've drawn is that this has already been codified and packaged for the masses. I don't know any of the details of the Baha'i faith, but the gist I take away is that God is real and it justifies all religions. That like everybody's right. And that what those religions teach is generally beneficial. And I buy that. Saying you are an omnitheist and going about your business is cool and all, until you need actual support and guidance. Each individual tradition offers actionable practices, which I think brings us to the conclusion. I was compelled to start praying, so I had to build one that represented what I believed in. And that's the thing, like this spiritual journey, when those different elements or religions and schools of thoughts being involved in, or whatever, I don't think I ever like abandoned the one that came before. Like it was always just kind of like building a house of cards, or yes and, like, oh, tell me more. Tell me more. I would like to know more. And being able to identify like the nuance between them, and like, because like at baseline you could just say like religion says be a good person. What does that mean? That's it's too narrow, or not too narrow, way too broad. Can we narrow it in? And then so these evolved like regionally out of like cultural relevance and that kind of stuff. So as a grown-up who is still searching for answers, I think for me personally, Thelema is the best tradition which to continue that pursuit. But at the same time, like, I've never felt the need to have any of these labels applied to me. That like, what was it, the Gandhi quote? God does not have a religion. I'm on board with that. That makes sense to me. I'll buy that. So, but not engaging in a tradition, then unless you're making up your practices from scratch, which I have done on occasion, and I will share it at points or whatever, but like sometimes that's not good enough. You gotta like lean on what's there for you. So here was me taking everything I knew about spirituality and making a prayer, because I'm a berry getting squeezed. I felt compelled to pray. So how did we do it? So I attempted to pray or observe or practice, perform Resh. I think it's something you perform. It's a ritual in Thelema, and you do it at various points in the day, sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. Now, I've glossed over this in earlier episodes, and that's why I'm coming back to clarify, like, specifically where I got this from and why I do it. That it's messed up to be... I shouldn't be vague about such things. So, when the first time I tried to perform the ritual of Resh, I did 3 stations of shouting commands that I didn't fully comprehend. I don't know what I was doing, and it felt very silly. And by the time I got to the 4th station, I was like, I'll be damned if this doesn't feel like some sort of ridiculous trick or trap set by Aleister Crowley himself. I was like, I ain't saying this 4th thing. I'm gonna like summon him or some shit. So instead, I said, good night, son. Thank you for sustaining life on this planet. I love you. And that was that. I think I did one of these. So at that point, I realized, like, okay, this is not a sustainable prayer, and I need to change it. Like, I can't do this in public. I know that there's suggestions to like say it do it in your head, visualize it in your head instead of saying it in public. Or I don't need my neighbors thinking I'm that weird. Normally, I don't care what other people think, but like now that I'm aware that the rest of the world exists, I am changing a little bit. So yeah, I wasn't hype on the thought of chanting a bunch of weird shit in my yard. So, and no offense to the Thelemites, like, more power to you. If you could chant weird shit in your yard, I support that. Um, so, um, one of the things, it occurred to me, I added in, like, kneeling and being prostrate, like, similar to the Islamic face Mecca 5 times a day and pray. I thought to myself, I would rather my neighbors think I'm Islamic or Muslim instead of them to think I'm an occultist. And yes, we're in America and we have freedom of religion, but I don't know. The general vibe I get is that Islamophobia is probably the most significant of the religious biases, with the exception of maybe like Satanism, and then I don't think your average American could tell the difference between Satanism and occultism. So if I'm in my yard making weird shapes with my arms and legs and chanting weird shit, people are just going to think I'm a Satanist. And I would rather people think I'm a Muslim. And then too, well, I'll give my thoughts on Satan in a later episode. So we were doing the kneeling and bowing 4 times a day, facing the sun. So yeah, the good morning, sun. Thank you for sustaining life on this planet. I love you. And then prostrate myself, and that wasn't enough. We kept going, and I'm not sure what order all these changes took place, but they were like incremental. So I added a part where each part of me, each limb connecting with the ground, I think a word, pray a word. The knees are dignity and respect. The hands are submission and humility. And once I place my head on the ground, I say, I learned a Taoist prayer on YouTube. Supposedly there's only one, and it's to be eternally grateful to participate in creation. So, and then I stand up. That's it. It helps. And it means something to me. And that's good enough, right? Let success be thy proof. So, okay. Here's where we go off the rails. Then I was like a little high and did some schizo rambling here, so we're going to read through that. Let me do a little tissue here. This is where we go off the road a bit. No, off the rails a bit. That makes more sense. Okay. So I said all of this. Now what? Do I deserve a cookie or a pat on the back? I'm not trying to imply what I did is good or right or intentional. I'm just a ping pong ball, and that was a wild ride. But more specifically, I am not a saint. I am not a sage. I am not a prophet. I have done many fucked up things in my life. I think the only I don't know if I could say this. I don't know if I can't say it because it's true. I don't know if I can't say it because it's not true. I'm going to try and say it. I can barely look at it. Fuck. I think the only good thing I have done in my life is that I haven't given up yet. As I've mentioned, I do suspect that I am a pratyekabuddha. That implies a dishonorable title. I don't have the skill set to express the important part. I probably should have made better life decisions. I found God when I was a little kid, and I kept it as an imaginary friend. It filled me with strength and joy. But I couldn't share it with anyone. If memory serves me right, most early attempts at authenticity were met with criticism and/or ridicule. I went through a really long arc of misanthropy. The amount of cruelty I have seen first and second hand is considerable. So I felt cast out from society at large. I didn't want to participate. That's not a viable option. Play the game or kill yourself. So here we are. I played the game. Did I win yet? Oh, I did. What did I win? More game. Great, that's my favorite. for bearing with me through that. A rephase. Last little bit, I'll let you go. A rephrasing or summary. I don't have any useful teachings on any topic except for one. Myself. Any other topic in the world, there is someone more qualified to speak on it. They are currently doing so. There are books and documentaries, you name it, every subject. So, all I've got is my own story. So that's what I'm gonna do. Fuck. Oh. Remember, you're a sovereign individual. Do what thou wilt. If you excuse me, I'm supposed to pray at sundown, and that kind of snuck by us here.